Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is the lesson, Unit 1, Lesson 6, for Gross National Happiness. In this part of the lesson, we're going to look at gross national happiness, which, yes, is a real thing. It's a real academic study, and it analyzes the cultural happiness of people around the world. This is one of the last things we're going to be looking at for the introductory unit for world cultures, as it basically combines everything that we've been talking about, looking at some of the things that matter or don't matter when people look at happiness through different ways. Before we get to this chart and all the different things that make up happiness, we must first understand where gross national happiness came from. Please go ahead and answer the key concept questions that appear in the Google Doc for this lesson and answer them accordingly. Gross national happiness started in this unlikely place called Bhutan. Let's go ahead and look more about it. The road through central Bhutan rises through frost-dusted evergreens, reaching a pass where travelers pause to take in the Himalayas, majestically stretching across the north. Steep forests descend into valleys coursing with crystalline rivers and pine-scented air. The wind howls down the canyons, fiercely flapping prayer flags and setting temple chimes to sing. Shades of Shangri-La? Perhaps, but don't tell the Bhutanese that. Bhutan, as a mystical kingdom, trouble-free and blissful, lives in the imagination of the West, Dorji Pajor says. Pajor is an anthropologist who has been researching Bhutan's biggest soft power export, gross national happiness. He says that GNH is an attempt to live in a way that's holistic, not restricted to merely measuring economics like gross domestic product or GDP. When Bhutan's prime minister introduced GNH to a United Nations forum as a paradigm for alternative development in 1998, it turned heads and spawned a global industry in happiness. Think tanks dissected it, and governments grappling with improving social policies took a serious look at it. After the 2008 financial crisis, Penjor says that people started to question the viability of Western liberal capitalism, the corporate world, and we were bombarded with questions. Today, experts and dignitaries around World Happiness Summits. The UN has declared a World Happiness Day. Students enroll in happiness courses. Yale reported its most popular class ever this year, How to Live a Happy Life. And this past week, the Delhi school system announced it is adding happiness to its curriculum, citing Bhutan. Yet, when the United Nations released a report ranking countries by happiness, last year Bhutan was nowhere near the top. Norway took the crown. The US ranked 14th. Beautiful Bhutan came in 97th. Still, the landlocked South Asian kingdom intends to keep a close measure of the public mood, and is famous for it. Defining gross national happiness is a matter of minutely categorizing and carefully tracking the lives of Bhutan's 800,000 citizens. Every 5 years, under the direction of the Center of Bhutan Studies and GNH Research, survey takers span out across the country to conduct questionnaires of some 8,000 randomly selected households. The complex survey is broken down into 9 domains, 33 indicators, and hundreds more variables. Broad categories include psychological well-being, health, time use, education, culture, good governance, community vitality, ecology, and living standards. This is no Western-style satisfaction survey. On a scale from 0 to 10, Penjor says Bhutan asked about 300 questions. In the beginning, the survey took about 9 hours, he says. Now we have refined the questions and it takes about 3 hours. Happily, the participants are compensated a day's wage. As one of the center's lead Happy Index researchers, Penjor says that we try to measure all forms of capital, so that is the difference between GDP and GNH. He says, for example, the government asks people about their spirituality. Do you meditate, says Penjor? How frequently do you pray? They ask how much time and money you devote to your community, how many hours you sleep, and how many hours you work. Some questions might startle an American. How often do you quarrel with your family? How long do you stay away from them? Do you trust your neighbors? From Namgay Zam, 32, who hosts a radio show on mental health challenges of the Bhutanese, the glowing image doesn't always square with reality. She points out, for example, that there are only a handful of psychiatrists in the entire country. Bhutan's unique setting or selling point is where we all are happy people from the land of happiness, she says. But the country is having difficulty living up to the brand. It's expensive, it's tiring, and it's making a lot of us cynical, Zam says. Is there trouble in Happy Land? Nidarup Zangpo, Executive Director of Journalists Association of Bhutan, says the outside world glamorizes Bhutan but overlooks a list of problems besetting the country. For starters, youth unemployment stood at 13.2% in 2016 and up from 10.7% the previous year, according to the government data report by leading national newspaper Quetzal. Bhutan's GDP was $2.2 billion in 2016, according to World Bank, and the kingdom is on the UN list of least developed countries. We have an increasing income gap. We have an increasing youth unemployment, environmental degradation, Zangpo says. Bhutan is facing climate change, he adds, with melting glaciers potentially affecting the hydropower plants that provide the nation's energy and a big chunk of its revenue. We have a lot of things to worry about, Zangpo says. Radio host Sam says that the idea of GNH may have put Bhutan on the map, but the concept has been hijacked by the West and quantified to a degree that makes it unrecognizable to ordinary Bhutanese. Gross national happiness is rooted in the principles of the country's religion, Buddhism, with its focus on compassion, contentment, and calmness, and Zam insists you don't quantify Buddhism. Yet she says that she has an abiding belief in the philosophy of underlying GNH, if not the packaging. Bhutan's image is as contented country as fueled an influx of international travelers. The government is aggressively pursuing high-end tourists who it claims have a low impact on the environment and culture. The increasing footfall, especially from China, is stimulating a construction and restoration boom. Modeling Bhutan on a development path that was more than material well-being was the brainchild of the country's fourth king, Jimmy Singye Wangchuck, who ascended to the throne in 1972. He declared gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. He also framed Bhutan's constitution and drove the political reforms that introduced a parliamentary democracy in 2008. His son, current king, Jimmy Nazar Namgyel Wangchuk, has energetically embraced his father's philosophy, fine-tuning the GNH index. The king and his commoner wife, Queen Jetsun Pema, are described as the Will and Kate of the Himalayas, but the British royals might envy the affection the Bhutanese hold for their own royal family. Lansang Dema 61 lavishes praise of the monarchy and credits its largesse for her happiness. 19 years ago, under royal policies, she was granted 5 acres of land and the government's standard allotment, and all the basic necessities to settle down the new place, sitting among her pile of fresh eggs and vegetables. Dema says that she's very happy to be on the land and self-sufficient, something she can share with her children. Bhutan offers all of its citizens free education, free healthcare, and villagers get much of their electricity at no cost. A mother of 7, Dema is grateful for all of that, but she worries that traditions are being eroded. Men nowadays wear their hair too long, in her opinion, and so do women. During my day, she says, it was cultural for us to keep short hair. Amid rapid modernization, she's also unhappy about Bhutan's young democracy. Given the choice, I would prefer a monarchy any day, Dema says. Under the monarchy, things are plain and simple and very effective. Farmer Sonam Tasheng, a father of 3, laments the loss of Bhutan's drokam, or nazma, or etiquette. People are losing this sense, he says, citing, for example, the casual clothes young people wear, like jeans and t-shirt rather than the traditional dress, the knee-length kimono like gold robe for men, and the ankle-length dress worn by women known as the kira. It is a challenge to our culture, he says. It is saddening to see. As for the lengthy questionnaire pummeling to the state of his general being, Triserding says, personally, I will not give 3 hours of my time for a survey, but he assures us he's most content. Bhutanese generally seem to derive happiness from the fact that in a region beset by conflict, their country is at peace. At 70, a farmer who goes by a single name, Thobeda, says, my time is almost over, but I would offer my prayers that my younger generation would enjoy the same kind of peace and prosperity that I have seen. But filmmaker Tashi Jotson doesn't see much point in the exercise of measuring happiness in his view. It's an abstraction that defies quantifying. What is so happy about life, he says? You just have to endure it. The title of the last Bhutan Gross National Happiness Survey in 2015 sums up what the country believes its experiment can provide: a compass toward a just and harmonious society. The findings showed that 8% of the people were deeply happy, 35% identifies as extensively happy, and 47.9% registered as narrowly happy. If those numbers say anything go by, Bhutan would actually be a ringing success, with more than 90% considering themselves happy, to one degree or another. But with nearly half the Bhutanese falling into the narrowly happy camp, that's a sizable chunk, who are well short of bliss, and that might mean that Bhutan is just about as content as the rest of us. So what is the moral of this reading? Why did we read this rather unique and eclectic type of source here? Really what I'm trying to get at, guys, is that cultures around the world view happiness in different ways. In fact, maybe you've heard your older generations, like parents or grandparents, say similar things that were mentioned in this reading by Bhutanese citizens, that times are changing, they don't recognize things anymore the way that they used to be, and you might have even heard the age-old adage, well, back in my day. Regardless, though, for the Bhutanese to come up with this type of system of measuring happiness is truly, truly unique. And maybe we as a Western culture can learn more about GNH. Here's the next part of the presentation where I'd like to take you guys to see just what there is to see about GNH. Please go ahead and fill in your notes while I discuss what different levels of GNH mean. Here are some of the factors that Bhutanese came up with that define and describe the happiness of you and your culture. Health. Do you have mental health? Self-reported health status? Healthy days? Disability? These types of factors affect whether or not you are in fact happy. And moreover, the status of your health could determine the status of your happiness. If you think about if you ever exercised on a bad day that you might have had, it might actually be enough to elevate your mood. Next, time use. How do you view your time at work? Do you work? What type of work do you do? How do you view sleep? I know many of you might stay up late as well, and you don't really get adequate amounts of sleep, so that's something to consider as well. Studies show that the more you sleep, the happier you are, and I believe that to be true. Education. What is the literacy rate of that culture? Do you have schooling provided for you? Is it free and compulsory? What type of knowledge and curriculum do you have? And do people of a culture value that education? Cultural diversity and resilience. Do people in your culture speak the native language, like everyone? Is there participation in cultural activities, festivals, and affairs? Do people in your culture embrace artistic skills and showcase them? And, more importantly, what type of continuity do you see in your culture? Next, good governance. How is your government performing for you? Are they corrupt? Are they free and fair? Do you have rights? What are the services they provide for you? How many people in your government can participate in the processes of determining the fate of their government? Community vitality. Do people in your community donate? Is there this essence of relationship between people in a community outside of the immediate family? How does your family see the community and do they interact with it? How safe do you feel in your community? In terms of ecological diversity and resilience, how is the environment in that particular place? How do you handle the issues? Does everyone have a responsibility towards the environment or just a few people? What is the wildlife situation like? Is there damage to it? How are rural areas compared to urban areas? And speaking of urban areas, are there any issues with urbanization or urban sprawl in your area? Living standards. What types of assets do you have in your home? What type of housing situation are you part of? What type of household per capita income is there attained in your lifestyle or in your family's lifestyle? And last but certainly not least, closing out on psychological well-being. Are you satisfied with your life, with what you've done, with what you're doing right now, with where you're going? Do you have positive emotions on a daily basis, doing things you enjoy? Or are you more filled with negative emotions and sentiments? How do you view spirituality? Are you religious or spiritual? Now, as quick and pinpointed as these points might have come across, the fact is that looking at G&H allows us the chance to see just what there is to see about how cultures view happiness. Keep in mind, from an American culture standpoint, we might value some of these things more than others. But from other cultures around the world, you'll be soon to find that they definitely view different aspects differently than us, and with good reason too. So I hope that you learn more about G&H and gross national happiness. Please don't forget to finish your notes and key concept questions and to do the gross national happiness survey at the bottom. Thank you very much.